Hello and welcome back to the Nasty Metal Productions channel here at YouTube, and welcome to another album of the week. This is episode number 114. Now, it was on last week's Album of the Week video, which was episode number 113, which was a spotlight on War Master from Bolt Thrower. It was on that one where I announced what was going to be this episode's album pick. Again, it was at the end of that one. It is, and since again, we are here on Monday, which again, they always come out every Monday, you see what it is. It is the 14th studio album from the legendary Blue Öyster Cult. It is Curse of the Hidden Mirror, which actually was originally released on June 5th, 2001 via, of course, CMC/Sanctuary. And yeah, just a very cool there. And since we are pretty much, since this past Saturday was June 5th, that means this album has reached its 20th anniversary. So 20 years for this one, which makes me feel old because of I actually was around when this album was released. And I'll definitely get into at least some other things that after this album, you know, other little details, but let's definitely focus here. Again, when I was growing up in the sort of, you know, household down in Fresno, California, I was very young when the previous album, Heaven Forbid, was released, which again was a very cool album in its own right. I always kind of liked that album, but that is where everything kind of began because of this album right here, Curse of the Hidden Mirror, pretty much followed that album. I mean, I'm not going to go into all the sort of history about Blue Öyster Cult. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I think I did a half-assed, I think, version anyways, or rundown on my review for the album that actually follows Curse of the Hidden Mirror here. But I'll get into some of this. I'll get into it. Anyways, where do I really begin? So, this again is their 14th studio album. Again, it follows Heaven Forbid from 1998. And that album was, though fucking AllMusic, whatnot, gave it a 3 stars. But the thing is, from a lot of hardcore fans of Blue Öyster Cult, it was actually considered a bit of a good comeback. A lot of folks actually really praised out of that album, so it actually did well for Blue Öyster Cult. And so, again, that album, we also saw, of course, some of the sort of debut for certain members being, of course, drummer Bobby Rondinelli, who actually I just covered fucking Difficult to Cure from Rainbow some month ago or so. And he had made his debut on that album. And then, of course, we have debuting bass player Danny Miranda in the band. So they debuted on Heaven Forbid. And so this is pretty much the same lineup that runs into this album here, Curse of the Hidden Mirror. And they pretty much at least recorded this album at the Millbrook Studios, or Millbrook Sound Studios in Millbrook, New York. So, again, being produced by Eric Bloom and Buck Dharma, that being Donald Rosier. So, it's produced by them, and we got at least the same lineup here for at least from Heaven Forbid debuting on this album. So, I guess in many ways, let's definitely just run into, Curse of the Hidden Mirror. Let's definitely go into it, alright? So here we go, Curse of the Hidden Mirror. Again, this was their 14th studio album, and it pretty much consists of at least 11 songs. It all clocks in at 50 minutes and 54 seconds. Now, we begin with, of course, with Dance on Stilts, which was actually written by both Donald Rosier, and I hope I'm not completely fucking butchering the name. Rosier, I think, is the best way to pronounce it. I apologize about that. And of course, John Shirley, who's actually written, or at least helped write, a lot of some classic songs from for Blue Öyster Cult too, and of course even writing for songs on the next album, which I reviewed about a year ago. So he does some work. He writes this track again. He helps writing a lot on the songs on this one, John Shirley. Again, he's written plenty of some of the songs with them. Again, he a classic writer too as well, and done a lot of stuff. Again, even inspiring some of their earlier songs too. Transmaniac MC was, of course, was one of the songs that was inspired by Shirley's first novel, Transmaniacon. So he's definitely a kind of considered a key writer too in Blue Öyster Cult's career. So it is always definitely a cool thing here. And of course, we also have other songs like Showtime, which was also co-written between Eric Bloom and John Trivers, who actually helped write some classic songs too for Blue Öyster Cult, that being The Great Sun Jester. I don't know if you could say that's actually a classic track by Blue Öyster Cult, because it's off of their probably the their least great album, that being Mirrors, but which was co-written between John Trivers, Eric Bloom, and Michael Moorcock. Then, of course, Cultosaurus Erectus with Black Blade, which is also co-written between Eric Bloom and Michael Moorcock. Then, of course, the song Soul Survivor and After Dark off of Fire, an Unknown Origin. And then here with Showtime on Curse of the Hidden Mirror. So he's got his hands in the in Blue Öyster Cult's cookie jar when it comes to at least songwriting. So then, of course, going into The Old Gods Return, which again, also somewhat co-written by John Shirley here. Pocket, again, another track between Donald Rosier and John Shirley. One Step Ahead of the Devil, which was written by pretty much most of the members on this album again. So that is very cool, of course, with Bobby Rondinelli actually getting writing credits on this album. I Just Like to Be Bad. Here Comes That Feeling, Out of the Darkness, which this track right here, Out of the Darkness, was written and recorded it for the movie Bad Channels, which they actually did a lot of the scoring for, but it never made it onto the actual soundtrack CD for the film. But it is in the film, so but it gets re-recorded for this album here. Stoner Love, Eye of the Hurricane, and finally Good to Feel Hungry. So there is your 11 songs on this album. I know I kind of beat around the bush when it comes to some of this, but that's because of, again, I want to get in some other sort of information in here. So there we go. Alright, I also should definitely mention that the title of the album, Curse of the Hidden Mirror, actually is taken from a track called Curse of the Hidden Mirrors, which was recorded for their very first album, though not under the Blue Öyster Cult name. No, it was actually under the name of, when they were under the name of the Stock Forest Group, which the album was titled Saint Cecilia, the Electric Recordings, which didn't get to see the light of day until April 23rd of 2001. So at least a few months before this album came out. But that's where the title of this album came from. So it's kind of, again, a bit of a kind of a nod back to the really early period. Again, that album, the Saint Cecilia, the Electric Recordings from Blue Öyster Cult's previous name, the Stock Forest Group, was recorded from like February to May 1970. So just a year or so before their actual debut album under the Blue Öyster Cult name. So there we go. There's definitely some nice little bits here and there that are at least some callbacks to really their period. But let's definitely get into this album. Let's definitely get into Curse of the Hidden Mirror. So, like I've stated, I really was turned on to Blue Öyster Cult really early in my childhood. I was really young when Heaven Forbid was released. And again, my dad, of course, had one of their compilations. At this point, I kind of forgot what was the name of the compilation CD right now, because of right here, it's just don't have that compilation CD anymore. But it was Workshop of the Telescopes. It was titled, which was a compilation, two CD compilation that had some really cool sort of hidden, I guess, two cool gems on that one. Some really unreleased stuff that album had to offer. But it was a compilation. I remember that disc game played a lot, though. So that's how I knew I was ever introduced to a lot of their early material. But Heaven Forbid was the newest album at the time, and I was really young. And when it came out, and the artwork kind of, even though that album's cover is considered usually one of the worst artwork within hard rock and heavy metal, but as a kid, that kind of creeped me out a little bit. I'm not gonna lie, it actually kind of did. So, but the album, the music that was contained on that album, I thought was fucking cool. Definitely a little more updated, a little more modern sounding for that time period, but still had a real nice sort of classic feel. Still very heavy, at times almost close to really being up there as one of Blue Öyster Cult's more metal sounding albums in some ways, especially with its opening song, I Like to See You in Black. Again, it's those, they'll just really heaviness. And so by 2001, when this album came out, I almost barely had a whole lot of memory of this album, even though I ended up rediscovering this album a few years after my dad had picked it up, or at least bought it through the BMG club. So yeah, when that was even a thing, the BMG club. Still, I remember, I ended up rediscovering it, but over the years, after many times of really spending with this album, all the time I spent with it, I mean, one of my earliest videos I ever did on this channel was in 2015. It was a series I did. It was called The Revisiting. And I decided to make this album as I think this might have been the first episode of The Revisiting. I can't remember. It was either that or Dawn Explosion from Captain Beyond. I can't remember which one came first, but this could have been the second one. And I had some positive things to say about that album, but after years, it was back on the shelf, and I barely could remember a whole lot of it. There was a few songs I remembered, but for the most part, I just had a blank on remembering. Again, back to since I just re-listened to this album before even recording this one, I have to say this is where I think is where a site like AllMusic has it all wrong. For them to kind of give Heaven Forbid 3 stars and give this album almost, I guess, 5.5 stars or 4.5 stars. For them to really rate it a higher above Heaven Forbid, I barely can remember a whole lot of the songs off of Curse in the Head Mirror. I can remember almost everything off of Heaven Forbid, which again they rated very low. But I can't remember a whole lot of stuff off this album. The only songs I can remember off of Curse in the Hidden Mirror here is being Dance on Stilts, Showtime here and there, Pocket, One Step Ahead of the Devil, which to me is probably the best song on the album. Out of the Darkness, I kind of can't remember, but then, of course, Eye of the Hurricane, and then Good to Feel Hungry. So for the most, those are some of the songs I can tell you I can really remember. Again, Dance on Stilts, Pocket, One Step Ahead of the Devil, and then of course Eye of the Hurricane and Good to Feel Hungry are really the only songs I really can remember off this album, because for the most part, The Old Gods Return, I Just Like to Be Bad, Here Comes That Feeling, Stone of Love. You know what, Stone of Love here and there, I'm starting to remember a little bit, but that's only some of the chorus part. For the most part, I barely can remember a fucking thing off this album. I think the biggest drawbacks to this album is that I know that this is now going to sound a little bit of a me knocking it, because I had praises earlier, but over the years here, I think the biggest drawbacks to this album compared to Heaven Forbid is that Heaven Forbid, I think musically had more going for it. It was almost all over the place. I mean, you have heavier songs on Heaven Forbid, like I Like to See You in Black, and so on. And then of course you had other sort of really cool tracks off that album as well, being Harvest Moon, X-Ray Eyes, Hammerback, Damaged, and then Still Burnin'. So you still had other really cool tracks off that album as well that I really kind of liked as well. Even Cold Gray, Light of Dawn are also, I had a pretty cool feel to it. But the thing is, it really kind of went back and forth. You had some songs that really kind of had more of that, almost very harken back to the 70s period, like again with the song like Damaged. But then you have real heavier tracks, like again, for example, like See You in Black and Damaged. No, I mean Hammerback and then X-Ray Eyes. You still had some really heavy songs on it. This one, it's almost the same sort of issue that I would have with an album like Mirrors, for example, and even to some extent, Revolution by Night. It stays in one groove for the most part, and it's really more laid back, a little bit too laid back, maybe for its own good, like the band almost had like writer's block with half of the album. It's like here they're getting some key writers back into the band again, like John Shirley and John Trivers, and then of course Richard Meltzer also co-writing on one of the songs on this album. But it still wasn't enough to kind of save the album from being a little diverse, because that's the one thing Heaven Forbid was diverse. Musically it had different feels. Each song had its own character, its own mystique to it. This one, it's almost just the same group for the most part. And I feel that's one of the things that kind of hurts this album in a way. It's like, it's cool that they're going and using a title for this album that is, again, a very nice nod back to their days when they were the Stock Force group. It's cool. But it's still not, that really would be just a bad excuse to kind of give this album a pass, because I just don't see why this album would even be given almost a really high rating. This is more of a 3 stars than Heaven Forbid, if you were to ask me. I feel like that's where AllMusic has it wrong. I know I don't want to try and go like make everyone think that I really care what people think, but this is one of those I really have to kind of address the elephant in the room. It's like, why? What? It's not a terrible record by any means. I mean, again, Dance on Stilts is a pretty cool sort of bluesy hard rocker, a little slow, moody, but it still has a nice riff going on to it. Pocket is probably the closest to more, again, very commercial sounding. This is really, again, Donald Roser, Buck Dharma. Again, same person. Great guitar player. He's definitely known for really the one that really writes a lot of the band's biggest hits, at least when it comes to singing, because again, like Don't Fear the Reaper and Burnin' For You, for example, were all huge hits for this band, and he was definitely one of those key elements behind those. Eric Bloom was definitely the key elements behind some of the more harder rockin' songs that were definitely heavy. But Donald Rosier / Buck Dharma, he was definitely the one that was really the key element behind the more soulful and more melodic songs that really gained them a lot of that sort of success. And it again, with a song like Pocket, it's going for that. It really is trying to go for that. But the thing is, I wouldn't say it's anywhere near any of the classic tracks, like either like Burnin' For You and, of course, to some extent, maybe even, for example, Don't Fear the Reaper. But it still has a nice groove to it. Even any of the songs off the album that comes after this one, which I'll eventually will mention. But it still is fine. But as far as anything that is, again, that is a beat that's memorable, not really. A lot of the song just falls flat half the time. Again, the only song on this one that really rocks the hardest would be One Step Ahead of the Devil. It's probably the closest to more of a straight-up metal kind of track off the album. It's got a nice sort of blues groove to it, but it's got a real heavy chorus too for it as well. It's probably the closest to one that really rocks the hardest. And it's actually the one that really sticks out to me. It's the only one that's actually memorable to me on the album. I really think it's actually one of the only really good fucking track off the album to me. But again, I don't want to say anything bad about even a song like Eye of the Hurricane, which has a kind of real cool groove to it, though heavy, but still has a modern sort of feel that I feel should have been picked as the one of the lead singles for this album, because Pocket was used because of, again, obviously trying and recreate the sort of hits of like Burden for You. But I think, again, that was probably the one that ruined it, because again, after this one, you know what, I'll wait. Still, there's just nothing here that at least just grabs me by the jugular. It just all seems to stay in one comfortable spot, but maybe a little bit too comfortably, and in some cases where it becomes kind of lazy, very couch potato wise. I know that's real harsh to use those terms, but that's just the way this album feels in some cases. Like, they didn't know what to do in order to come up with a follow-up to, I feel, was a good fucking album with Heaven Forbid. I don't care what some of these idiots on AllMusic think. I felt like that album, it was a good sort of comeback album that really was like some of the strongest material they had ever released. This one just felt a little bit fall behind, I feel with this album here. The kind of, at least as far as other really interesting, diverse ones, it does end with the track Good to Feel Hungry. This was a really interesting track. I mean, a song like Out of the Darkness, while it does kind of have a real nice feel, it's got that sort of late 80s, early 90s sort of period of Blue Öyster Cult. Again, it was recorded for the Bad Channels film, and it does have that. But again, I think the original recording was a lot better compared to this one. Also, I failed to mention that the song Showtime was actually originally written for Cultosaurus erectus. And it was actually, there is an early version of it that was recorded, but it never made it onto the album. So, and I felt like that version is even better than this one. So, there you go. It's a good track, but not bad. But to go back to, of course, Good to Feel Hungry, this one really has an interesting feel going on to this one. This one is more groovier, more melodic too, and this one, of course, has Eric Bloom doing the vocals for this one, but it's got a really interesting feel going on to this one. Again, it's got a real nice, I wouldn't say jazzy, but it just have a very, very groove to it going on. And for some reason, I feel like this is one of the songs I should hate on the album because of it is probably too slick. A little bit too poppy in some places too. Again, kind of going back, I guess, to say to more of the poppy feel, I guess, maybe you can say. You know what, no, I wouldn't say. If anything, this is what wouldn't have been too far out of place. It wouldn't have been out of place on like an album like Cultosaurus erectus or Fire of Unknown Origin. Because again, it just has that feel, but for some, I mean, I know that should be give me a reason to really like this song, and I actually do kind of like it. Because again, it's got such a hook to it that it's easy to remember. I don't know, my brain. I don't know why my brain chooses to really remember the fucking chorus and everything. I mean, most of this song, I don't know why, but there's something to it that I can't get why my brain can get is wrapping its, I guess it's fucking brain around this song. I know I'm having a hard time using terms and analogies and whatnot. I guess that's how this album does to me, I guess, because of it. It's a little bit difficult to really kind of talk about this album in some cases, is because of, again, I just don't find it that memorable of a record. But I don't think it's a terrible record, but just doesn't do a whole lot to actually keep my brain interested in a way. It just doesn't keep my ears the one to keep it open while this album plays. It just, by the time it just becomes background music. And that's the only fault I can give this album. Production wise, it's fucking crystal clear. It's crisp. But that's still not enough to really say that this album is good. It's not a bad record. It's still better than Revolution by Night and Mirrors. I guess to an extent maybe Club Ninja. But compared to other albums like Cultosaurus erectus, Fire of Unknown Origin, even Imaginos, and then even some of the classic albums, like for example the first 3 albums from them, And then even, another one too, I can say is, Spectres. This album just ends up falling flat. There's just not a whole lot of hooks to it that keeps me interested. They tried the right hooks, but they obviously were suffering from writer's block in some cases. That's probably one of the main reasons why they might have went back to at least John Shirley, but it just seemed like even he probably didn't have a lot of the creative juices in him while coming up for anything for this album here. That's why a lot of it just ends up falling just back into the background instead of actually being at the forefront, where it keeps you very interested, where it keeps you excited, but it doesn't do that. It just stays in one sort of pacing, and it doesn't do anything else. That's about it. That's all I can say about this one. Really, as far as highlights, well, I just told you the songs that were the most memorable to me are the ones that are the highlights, that being Dance on Stilts. I guess Pocket, One Step Ahead of the Devil, I Have the Hurricane, and Good to Feel Hungry. Those are really the only fucking highlights to me that I really can find that are memorable. Again, they're the only ones that I actually can remember off this album. So there we go. And of course, after that, this, since I'm pretty much done here, of course, it's probably one of the main reasons why this was their final album for a long time. Because of, with the release of Pocket, again, here, apparently Wikipedia says that when they released the track Pocket, it had lackluster sales and poor relations. Again, just with the track, again, apparently it was poorly received. And again, the sales, and then they got dropped by Sanctuary Records. As a result, Blue Öyster Cult did not release another studio album for nearly 20 years, until, of course, The Symbol Remains from 2020, which was last year, finally name-dropping the album. And that's where I'm pretty much here with my final thoughts for this album. Of course, this being some of the, the final album for, like, Bobby Rondinelli, who leaves the band after this one and pretty much gets replaced by Jules Rodino, who would pretty much would debut in the band in 2004 and has been with them and debuting on The Symbol Remains. But that's where I'm pretty much at with my final thoughts on Curse of the Hand Mirror, because of this is where I feel this album at this point is pretty much sandwiched in between Heaven Forbid and The Symbol Remains. Probably two of their most very well written and their most memorable albums, and also some of them just two of their strongest releases. Because The Symbol Remains, even for how many songs the album is on the album, again, 15 songs or 14, it's still it's each song has its own unique feel to it. It still feels classic. It still has its own hooks to it. It's got their own, just their overall vibe that you can recognize with a particular song. That's the biggest problem with Curse of the Hand Mirror. There's not a whole lot of things going on for a lot of these songs. There's not really a whole lot of standouts or any songs that really stick out, like anything that have their own unique feel, that feels like their own particular song. It just blends in too much. Whereas with the songs on Heaven Forbid and The Symbol Remains, each song has its own memorable feel to it. It all has its own unique character. This one just didn't have it as much. And that's where I'm pretty much at, and those are my final thoughts. So that's kind of where I am with this one. Not the worst album within Blue Öyster Cult's, discography, but it's far from their strongest. So that's where I'm kind of at. It's not a bad record, but it's not really a good record either. It's just, it's just there. It's a little average again. I get maybe slightly above average, but that's about it. So there we go. Again, this was like I stated, it was their last album for nearly 20 years until The Symbol Remains. And from last year. So there we go. Again, it has reached its 20th anniversary this past Saturday. And so if you have any memories of this album when it was first released, if your memories are either negative or even positive, you can leave them in the comment section below. But if you haven't even heard this album and are kind of dipping your toes into the Blue Öyster Cult pool, well, I wouldn't start with this one. I would say this would be one of the last albums you even check out. That's where I'm at with this one. So there we go. I'm going to end this. Hope all of you enjoyed. This is Heavy Thrash saying I am out. And I'll see you all later. Take care, everyone.